Welcome back to Trauma Talks with Krystal Boothe, the podcast for people who have tried everything to heal their trauma and want real solutions so that they can get on with their lives. Whether you are working in the healing arts or in need of healing, this podcast is for you. Today's guest is Eddie Barnett. He has worked in mental health for over 18 years as a licensed professional counselor. Eddie is passionate about helping people experience the authentic, healthy relationships they were intended for. Eddie started his career in the corporate environment for 18 years. Through this experience, he has seen everything from trauma to self doubt and how it can affect our day to day interactions. These experiences have helped him to connect with the struggles many people have in achieving a work life balance. The experience has also taught him about the problem of trying to find your worth in the workplace and stress this has on individuals and their personal relationships. He desires to help individuals and couples in his community by providing quality, empathetic uh, clinical counseling to achieve not only healing, but a better connection in the individuals that matter the most in their lives. He has additional training in trauma informed therapy and diagnosing and treating shame-based disorders. Eddie work includes somatic approaches to working with trauma. This includes using parts from AEDP, IFS, and experiential therapy. As each person's trauma story are unique, so should their trauma therapy journey be. So this episode is going to aim to explore the importance of approaching transitions from celebration to tragedy with sensitivity and awareness of trauma, as well as practical strategies for supporting individuals and communities through these challenging times. Welcome, Eddie Barnett. Great to have you on the show.
Krystal, thank you for that introduction. That was great.
No
I'm glad to
problem.
be here, and I appreciate it.
No problem, Eddie. I really am happy to have you, and I'm really excited about what we're going to be talking about today. I wondered if you could explain what it means to have trauma-informed approach when transitioning from celebration to tragedy. What does that mean, Eddie?
Yeah. So, what we experienced, and this is all spurred from an event here that happened, and I'm from the Kansas City area, that happened around a shooting that happened, a big public event, and it
What was
all.
the public event, Eddie? What was that?
So the Super Bowl championship parade, there was a shootout that happened after the parade ended, and there were um, around 90 to 95,000 people in the area, and
There
there's
was a shooting.
children.
There
There
was a
was
shooting in your area.
Yeah, there was a
What
shooting
year was
after the
this?
parade, and so
Hey, what year was this, Eddie?
say that again.
What year was this? Or
This was
was
earlier this year. This happened
oh,
around on
okay.
February. It actually happened on Valentine's Day this year.
No.
The parade was on the 14th of February, and there was a celebration, drums playing, everybody's cheering, and then all of a sudden gunfire and mass chaos and cell phone videos of this that get published out and get quickly everybody's. So the trauma multiplied, and it spread throughout the city, throughout the whole realm of what's going on. And so the question that came to me as a therapist is working with trauma is, how do we step in and help those people transition? Because that's a big transition to trauma, immediately taking them over. How do we step into a space where we help them realize and understand they're going to go home with their kids, and their kids are going to have questions, or their kids are going to not, and they're going to completely shut down, or they're going to have off the wall weird responses that they have. And that's what we're seeing in how kids react, teenagers react, adults react differently through all of these trauma events. And so unfortunately, they're not going to stop. So what are we doing from our practice and from our standpoint is trying to both educate and help parents and help friends of friends be in a space for that, but also be there to support and let let those people know that when it becomes too much, we're there, and we're there for that space.
Right. So that is so interesting. So all of a sudden, you guys were having this really great time. You were, what were you guys doing? What was, it was a parade. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, so
Was
there
it?
was
Okay, I
so
got you.
yeah,
And
so
then
the
all of a sudden, you were in this parade for Valentine's Day, right? Am I correct?
so it was on Valentine's Day, but it
It
was
was
for
on
the
Valentine's.
Super Bowl celebration. So
Oh, okay, okay.
um and so
Makes
it
sense.
opened up this thing where they let kids out of school that day.
Okay,
They had a what they called around here a red snow day, the Chiefs being a red team here in Kansas City.
that's right. That's
And
right.
they let so there's all these kids present down there. There's these kids
Okay.
present watching on TV, and this gunfire happened.
Oh my
Um,
goodness.
so we stepped in and were able to kind of work with different therapists throughout the whole city to try to infuse a network of people. There were people that were using EMDR trauma therapy and making
Okay.
that available. But
Mm-hmm.
from our practice standpoint, we don't do EMDR there. So we work from a trauma informed process where we slow down, sit with them.
Mm-hmm.
We are able to walk through and identify what's the story coming up in them, be able to slow
Mm.
them down, and the patience to do that, to know to listen and slow down with them.
Okay.
Um,
Be in the moment. I'm hearing you.
be in the
Mindful.
moment.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I get you.
yeah. And then
Mm-hmm.
he'll be able to help them walk forward because
Okay.
inevitably they're going to be in a trauma situation before. Or
Mm-hmm.
again, how do they not become triggered in that?
Mm-hmm.
So they teaching them to look for the helpers. Like Fred Rogers used to say, when you're in trauma, look for the helpers.
Okay.
Come back to that
That's a great.
space.
That's a
Do a
great.
biological check. How
Mm-hmm.
are we doing? What am I feeling? Am I able to secure myself? And this goes for parents and kids, and teens, and everybody in between.
So the first thing you guys did was to kind of, you know, assess where each of the practices' strengths were, is what I'm hearing you say, and how they, address trauma in general, just in general, and then he, getting together sort of a program so that you guys can start to welcome the community in for this kinds of treatment that you guys have. And so
Yeah.
basically EMDR is one of them, and then also just trauma informed approach, and then it sounds like a little bit of mindfulness there too,
Yes.
from what I know.
Definitely
And,
some mindfulness, and then some
mhm,
different
mhm. And
IFS
in the
work. Yeah.
moment being present,
Yeah.
connecting with reconnecting to yourself. Is that what you're kind of
Yeah.
referring to?
Being able to do that.
Wow.
Um,
So tell
yeah.
me what else happened. I want to hear more.
So we were able to hold that space with them,
Hmm.
and be able to recognize and hit radio stations to be able to help
Okay. Well,
parents get this word out
hmm.
of what do we do. We were on a couple local broadcasts here, just asking the questions, and we one of them in particular had parents send in or grandparents, how do I help my kid? What do I
Yeah.
do? What are the signs I look for? And that was
Hmm.
the number one question that everybody was saying is, what am I looking for in
That's
trauma?
it. Yeah. I have
How
no
do I
idea.
see that in my people? Because
Hmm.
we're not trained to do that. Like
That's right.
we are,
Can
you
we
and
do
I
it?
still
Can
are.
you tell me what, how can we, what is a way to see this? I mean, that's a very good point that you just made. Like, we don't know what it looks like. I mean,
Right.
suppose I'm not a therapist like I am, what are we going
Right.
to do?
And so there's oftentimes number one, we're looking for strong emotions.
Okay.
Really the change in emotions, sadness, anger, anxiety, guilt, those type of things are really big. If your child comes home or your kid comes home, or even just in the car, you ask them, how was your day? And they abruptly come back with you a big response of, it doesn't matter, and I don't care why are you thinking. So when the response you're getting from them typically isn't congruent to what you're asking and the way you asked it, look at this space where of going, okay, so what's going on in your life? And if they're not willing to open up to you, just be able to listen. Hey, I'm here when you're ready. I'm here to listen to you, and I'm here to just be present and slow with that.
I was just gonna say, so what you're saying right now, I just wanna keep up with what you're saying, is that if they see some incongruency in their child, an incongruent behavior such as, what they're doing versus the way they're communicating don't align.
If they don't match, press in, and know that they may not be ready to talk, but letting them know I'm ready when you are, I'm here and available when you are. Um, so, uh, Watching their sleeping patterns is another way to do it. If you notice their sleeping changes big time, if you see an increased need for independence, all of a sudden your kid who wanted to hang out or do something after school or was okay with grabbing dinner with you once a week no longer wants to do that. We're checking into those spaces and going, okay, what's going on here?
Some changes in their communications and changes in their behavior.
Correct. Those are the
Right.
big ones to make
That's
sure we're just
huge.
watching with those.
That's
Um,
very useful, Eddie. I really
yeah,
like that, what you
yeah.
just said. Hmm.
And so what we have to focus on is their trauma is unique, um, just like every one of us. We can experience the same event, the shooting at the parade being the example, but we each experience it uniquely. And so what we want to make sure we're not doing as parents or even as friends is projecting our trauma or our interpretation of the trauma onto someone else.
I hear what you're saying. So I'm catching on. So the first thing that I would tell the listener is that they need to look for differences in their communication and in their differences in their behavior that are not congruent with what's actually taking place. Now, obviously, if someone's upset and there's something negative going on in the environment, that wouldn't constitute what we're talking about here. That would be okay. You're upset. Well, clearly there's something for you to be upset about. But if there's nothing for them to be upset about, and let's say they're upset or they're speaking in a negative tone or negative, having some negative connotations with their communication, then they might be experiencing some trauma. So, and then you're saying also the behavior, the things that they usually like to do, and then their sleep patterns. And so, what can you see in a person's sleep patterns that would kind of pick up on that they're experiencing some reaction to the trauma?
Looking at times where they have trouble going to sleep, and depending on the age of the kid, it kind of all varies and differs. But if all of a sudden they want to sleep with the light on, or they want the door open, or if a kid's younger and they're wanting you, can you stay a little longer and lay beside my bed? Like looking at those situations, all the way to the point where maybe they're sleeping longer in the mornings. They don't wake up as well. They're like just watching a change in that pattern abruptly, and it's an abrupt change. So obviously we still look at the congruence piece of that. And what I mean is, does it fit the environment? To what you were saying just a second ago, Krystal, does it fit what's going on? If you have, you obviously you can get into a fight with your kids, like an argument or whatever. You disagree about things, right? Those things are different than looking for trauma in that space. What you're looking for is, are they having trouble sleeping? And what I mean by that is going to sleep, needing to change the pattern of how they go to sleep, whether it's dark or they're afraid of the dark now all of a sudden, or they need you closer, or they don't want you to tuck them in. And then the fact waking up multiple times in the middle of the night, or the kids, once they get to a certain age, they start to sleep through the night. But all of a sudden you got this kid, your child's waking up in the middle of the night, whether they're yelling for you or not. Is this happened after an event that you can name, that you've identified with them? Right, and just being open to listen to them. These are the cues for you to ask the question, are you okay? And don't be afraid to ask that as a parent. Are you okay?
And tell me something. What about the triggers? Let's talk a little bit about the triggers. I love this. That now we're able to recognize those things. I want to also recognize the triggers that they might have. So, what are some potential triggers that individuals may encounter when transitioning celebration excuse me, or tragedies?
Yeah, and so it's very interesting. These can be as simple and easy ones as thinking about kids out of this environment. They see ketchup. Ketchup relates to blood because of the red. It was all of a sudden that now triggering me. It could be something that small to you get a reaction from ketchup to a book drops off a desk. We have the big rolling trash bins in our area, and the lid slams shut, and it's a big loud bang, right? That could be traumatic to somebody in that space too. Watching what those little things do with your kids. To the radio comes on, it's way too loud. So those are some triggers that can trigger from that event.
So that's something that we can identify as maybe the parents or even the school officials or just someone that's familiar with this child would be like, okay, what's going on? Why all of a sudden you're scared of a book falling on the floor? Like, what's going on? Yeah. And then we'd be able to possibly make some sort of advances towards that child to help them maybe consider therapy or something. Yeah.
Yeah, correct. And it's being able to support them and ask those questions. And that's all a part of what we call the assessment portion, right? We can teach parents how to do the assessment, how to know, do they need to look for care? Do they need to look for an extended care, or do they need to support their child? We're working with some ideas of how to be able to support parents in that space. So we're really just giving them some classes about an opportunity to be able to learn how to learn how to just be in that space, because we'll give parenting classes when you're getting ready to have a child, and then you have a young child, and there's all these books, but there's never really an opportunity to follow up on those. And so that's what we're looking at too as a practice.
That's great. So triggers can be. Give me some more triggers because I like the catch up, but I want to think about some more triggers that they might be able to see. So that they can be aware. I want to help bring some awareness to the community right now with this conversation because I mean there's a lot of tragedies going on in the world right now, and there's a lot of things like the bridge, in Boston that fell down. People were really worried. I actually had talked to someone yesterday when I went to Easter Sunday church, and they were just talking about the fact that they're from Boston, and they really were afraid that their family was, possibly hurt, and maybe on that bridge, or that someone that they knew was nearby that bridge. No one knew what was going on. So this is becoming more and more prevalent today, and I just want to think about what could be some triggers, uh, you know, that we could really hone in and kind of help the everyone get in touch with so that they can get the help that they need before things get way out of hand.
Yeah. And so sometimes it's environment. And so what we got to look, especially as this bridge collapse that just took place, um, being in a space where now, I definitely in that area, there's a lot of bridge crossings that happen to go and get you from one side to another. So it's not like you're going to avoid a bridge. So the next time you're going across a bridge, there's there panic from the kid? Is there a panic from the adult of gripping the steering wheel a little tighter? And so looking at the triggers of being in that environment, we'll just use the bridge as an example. Watch your reactions when you get on a bridge. Are you now gripping your steering wheel a little tighter? Are you maybe pressing that gas pedal just a little bit harder than you normally would have on a bridge going across? And just checking those feelings and that raced heart rate, just maybe that dry mouth, a little bit of cotton mouth going on when you're in the environment. So environment is such a big piece. Um, I know that there are some events that take place and where you think about unfortunately, like the shootings at schools that we've had. We hear this big thing about the shooting at the school, and as a society that's not affected right next to it, we don't realize like the school's going to get cleaned up. They're going to put the school back together, and then we're going to ask those kids that were at that school when that happened to go back to school. And so how do we hold that environment piece well for them? How do we walk through, how do we be present as parents, as supporters, as even clinicians throughout the public of holding that space? So that just environment's another trigger. Um, but the news, the social media exposure, though, all of those pieces are such a big piece. You think about how much do you listen to the radio when you're in your car? How much do you just scroll through Facebook and you just hear something playing, or you scroll through a social media platform and you hear those things playing? You hear them, you digest the trauma, but who else around you does?
Yeah, you know what I call that, Eddie? I call that suddenly trauma. I call it suddenly trauma with my clients. I say you went through suddenly trauma, and that literally people don't understand that suddenly trauma. That fear literally comes inside of their bodies, and literally they have now fear in their body from think something happened suddenly. It's the timing that those kinds of things happen, and so I love that we're talking about this. This is a really really important um, conversation. I also want to talk about what role does communication play in supporting the individual like this? Because what type of communication, or how would we communicate with someone that's dealing with this? You know what I mean? This kind of situation. Uh, from a celebration to tragedy. Because I mean, in the situation with the Boston, I mean, they were at work. A lot of people were at work. I mean, there was a normal work day for them. They were going back to work, and they were just, doing their normal thing that they do. And then suddenly, I mean, this bridge is, completely coming down, and it was suddenly. You know what I mean? And that's what happened in your situation too, you know, around, Valentine's Day, right? And so, yeah, so that's the same type of thing. It's just something like we're dealing with. It's a suddenly aspect of it that I think that makes it the trauma so impactful. And people carry those traumas. I work with people like every day who, or recently I've worked with someone who actually had that kind of situation where something happened to them and it was just out of nowhere, and that this happened, and since that time they were actually carrying that trauma. So what way would we communicate? How can we help the client, or the family, because sometimes it's not the client that even wants the therapy, it's the family that ultimately thinks they need it. And so how can we help the family or the client? What will we say to them?
So we do what's called a support session for when those type of situations are noticed in our practice. And our number one thing that we're telling them is to obviously take care of yourself the best way you can, but be aware of your own feelings and reactions to who you're interacting with. So that communication is, be authentic, be real. This affected me also, and I'm open to talk to you and talk with you about that. But keeping an understanding of their experience is different. Um, Share what your experience is, and then be willing to listen. The biggest part of communication is realizing there's a part that you have to play in not saying a word in communication. You just have to be present.
Okay, so sometimes the communication is not communication, huh? It could be maybe,
It's
yeah, just
presence.
presence. Yeah, I got you.
Yeah, and it's presence, and so we have an opportunity to teach authenticity, but we also have an opportunity to teach them empathic listening. And so we'll walk through some of the very trainings that we've had as therapists. Lean in, eye contact, just listen, nod your head, right? Those small little social things that we've been trained to do. We do empathetically, but teaching the people that are supporting others how to do that, even if they're not professionals,
Yeah.
and
So
then
that
teaching
sounds
them.
like that would build some really good rapport, what you're
Yeah,
talking
and so
about.
that's our opportunity, is to build rapport with the family so that they know how to support them. We get them an hour a week, most likely, for helping the client, helping them go through that.
Okay.
What support do they have for all the other hours the rest of the week?
Wow. Yeah, that's it. That's it. Wow. So the communication is very, very viable. Is there anything about this that you really, or was like a burning issue for you when you said, hey, you know what, I'm going to go on and show with Krystal? What was the burning issue that you wanted to tell the guests before we transition into the next part of this show?
I guess trying to word it the right way, but why just say it is, don't try to be their therapist. You're there to be their support person of life, whether it's your kid and you're their parent, or it's your best friend and are you there be there as a friend. Your job is to be present, communication, support, and if they want to seek more support, or if they need to seek more support, be willing to walk that journey with them, because it is a journey and they need some people to lean on when they're going into that process. Some people stepping into working on their trauma is the hardest thing they're going to do in their life, even harder than going through the trauma, because it is such a difficult process to try to heal.
I just want to remind the guests they're watching Trauma Talks with Krystal Boothe, and we're interviewing Mr. Eddie Barnett here. And I just wanted to make sure that they like, share, and subscribe to the Trauma Talks with Krystal Boothe. And we're going to be delivering a lot more content like this to help you guys navigate the areas of trauma and mental health. So I'm excited to continue to talk with Mr. Eddie Barnett, and get learn more about what he's helping us with in the area of trauma informed care. So let's just talk a little bit, Eddie, about getting them back safe, because I know that safety is a very key component in trauma healing. And how do let's talk about some of the ways that we can help these survivors of trauma in this particular celebration trauma where it's kind of, I call it suddenly trauma, but
Hmm.
where they are suddenly they're in this situation that they never thought that they would be in. What could we do to get them back safe again so that they can start their healing journey?
So we move into a problem solving skills. This
Okay.
is one of the big things that we do. Two main activities that we do with clients over the first couple sessions when we're working on trauma is helping them build problem solving skills, which is define the problem and decide the ownership. The problem is we find the problem concretely. And I say problem in a space of what was the trauma trigger? Why was it triggering you? And what does it tell you about your story? Then we set some goals and we assess and clarify them, what their needs and concerns are. We're using statements like, I want blank, I need blank, I feel concerned that, or I'm afraid that. And then we brainstorm along those terms and we write down all the possible options that we can. And it's really just word association and just recording those things out for them. And then we kind of create a pros and cons list of that. And so give it an opportunity for us to be able to just define the problem, give them ownership over the problem.
All right, so really getting clarity.
Yeah, really get that clarity. And then we promote some healthy activities around it.
Okay.
So we define a plan. When these things come up, inevitably when they're not in session and when they're out doing those, how do we do pleasant activities, healthy activities for ourselves?
Okay.
So like go for a walk, read a book, make a bucket list. And this can be, they can put it on a wheel and have some fun with it. And it's a different activity each time, or they just can have their list of activities they feel like they want to go to.
And so, what are those activities aimed at doing for the person who's experiencing this trauma? What is the goal for that?
So a bit of it is to regulate system. We believe in bilateral stimulation, so that they're stimulating each side of the brain, right? And so going for a walk, reading a book, and playing with a fidget spinner at the same time, being able to do some tapping, listening to music. What we're trying to do is calm the system down, give them an opportunity to ground themselves and realize they're not in a trauma situation right now, even though their body makes sense they are.
It's a bit of a grounding technique, but it's kind of advanced, I think, in some ways, because sometimes we used to do the grounding techniques where they're just sitting on the floor and just, you know, kind of doing those mindfulness exercises where they're touching, you're connecting with this part of their body or that part of their body or something like that. But this is pretty interesting. Tell me more. I don't know if I know about this one.
Yeah, so what we're trying to do is bring the somatic experiencing into it. So we're really bringing in the effects of the body. The Trauma Keeps the Score is an old book, I think all read as therapist.
Yeah, trauma keeps score. That
Yeah, the
definitely.
body keeps the score. That's what it's but trauma does keep a score, doesn't it? Yeah. But
Yeah, I
as
remember that book. Hmm.
as the body, store these things away, we can, what we're doing is calling out a little bit of those pieces to help calm those elements down, because inevitably these triggers, kind of going back to our triggers conversation, but it's bringing some things up. And so what we're trying to do is give you a spot to go out, be active, move those things through, let your brain clear, and create a serotonin
Is this a
pickup. So
trying to help them reconnect to the trauma or disconnect?
disconnect and calm
Trauma?
their
Why
system.
why disconnect, Eddie? Why
So
disconnect?
what we're doing is we're taking them,
Different way, but let's talk about this.
yeah. So they're
Mhm.
in a trauma state. So they're induced into a trauma state in a non-supportive environment. So where they're at, this
Oh, this
is,
is a time when they're not in a supportive environment. I
yeah.
got you.
So not in our office. This is when, so our promoting healthy activities is so they have a resource bucket to do when they're not in a space. So
You're trying
you're
to
you're
help them cope when they're not around a
correct.
therapist or supportive.
Correct. Yeah.
Got you.
Thank you for clarifying that. So
Mhm, mhm.
it increases the likelihood that they can keep going with their care, because if they're in a traumatic event between us, what we've seen is if somebody keeps getting triggered in between our appointments, they're going, this isn't working, therapy's not working fast enough,
Yeah, that's true. It's
I'm
true.
going to pull away, I'm going to pull out. So what we do is we resource them to be able to give them the gaps to be able to fill in until they're back to see us again. until they're back in that space, until they feel healthy enough to be able to do this without us. And our goal is always to work them to a spot to be healthy enough to do that.
Okay, I see what you're saying. So it's kind of in the interim that you want to make sure that they have the tools in their hand, excuse me, that they can use on a daily basis to get calm, get safe, get settled, so that they can function. Because even though they've gone through whatever traumatic event they've gone through, they still got to function in daily life. They still got to do whatever, make a, maybe go to school or work or whatever they have to do. And they definitely want to get some sleep for sure. So yeah, that's really cool that you guys are giving them those resources and stuff. So do you um, analyze with each client which resources are best fitted for each client, because every client is different. Let's talk a little bit about kind of honing in and helping the person find the right fit for them, because that's, I think, one of the things that I notice in therapy is when it comes to working with clients, one thing that works for one client doesn't necessarily work for another. How do we mitigate that? Yeah.
Yeah, because we're all unique, right? We all have different ways that be able to help us process this too. And so what we do is we do resource buckets of what they're doing. Just like we were going through with the problem solving skills, we assess and clarify and get the needs. And so with those I want, I need, I feel concerned statements, we take those and we turn those into I it feels good when I need a connection that does. And so we try to resource these people. And so while we say in our guidance it's call a relative, we have them state call my Aunt Jean, or whatever the name is in that space. Listen to soothing music versus just listen to music. Listen to jazz music. And it's one of those ones of getting the resources. We give them the general prompt and we have them fill out about 8 to 10 things that they identify they like to do, that they can do. And sometimes that takes a little bit of coaching, because if they're triggered, they're in a space or they're feeling, in that, it's hard to come up with things that feel good, right?
Unsafe. How about that? Yeah, they're feeling unsafe, definitely. I mean, because the safety was taken from them during that event, Eddie. I mean, during that celebration, it's like they thought that they were safe. That's the whole key thing about trauma is I think I'm safe, and then all of a sudden I find that I'm not safe. That's the big deal.com, I call it.
And so what we do in that space, if they're not able to identify it, this is where we bring the experiential part of my background training into it. We'll get them up and we'll walk in a circle around our room. My room is not huge, but it's about 10 foot of a circle if we walk around together, and we just walk slow and we just talk about the event. We talk about what would have happened differently if that didn't happen. How would they have exercised the rest of the day? How would they have what would they have who they would have talked to and tell them about this joyous occasion, like this fun event. And so we're able to then get them to talk outside the trauma and identify the things that they want to do when they couldn't sit there and do it.
You know what I'm thinking right now, Eddie? I'm
What's
thinking
that?
that what you guys are doing is your guys are helping them find their resilience.
That's exactly it.
That's what you guys are doing. I got it. I love it. I get it now.
Yeah.
So yeah. So and I love that they're helping them find their resilience and get clarity, of course, too, because I saw the clarity. Like, okay, what do you like? What do you want? What do you do? Okay. So now I know the person is now clear on everything about themselves that maybe they didn't know before this trauma happened because they never went to therapy. They never had to, or never thought they did. Anyway, and so now they got the clarity, and then they find that there is resilience in every person. There's a level of resilience, and so helping a person find resilience is quite important, because we are gonna there are gonna be times that we're gonna go through things in life and that we're not gonna expect to go through, and we are gonna have to be able to learn where our resilience lies. So I'm excited about what you just talked about today. I know that this is going to be very helpful, and so so let's talk about some self-care. We kind of were talking about self-care, but let's talk about some of the other things that you do in the area of trauma-informed practices. Can you share some examples of trauma-informed practices or interventions that are effective in supporting individuals and communities during this transition? Let's talk about the communities, because I know that a community in and of itself is affected. Right now Boston is affected. I mean, they kind of feel like, okay, we don't know what's happening. We don't know what's going to happen next. I mean, you start to lose your feeling of safety and security, and you know that things aren't going to be okay for you. You lose that. So what can we do? How can we, work with the community? How can we take this resilience conversation, because I love this conversation, this clarity conversation we're having, so amazing. And how can we take this and use this for a community organizational type thing, where we get together and we work with the community? What can we do?
Well, so for those that work with trauma or those that are in that space, don't be afraid to reach out. Don't be afraid to reach out to other therapists within the area. You all have a like mind. So being able to, okay, let's have some like language. What can we get to do? And if we have multiple voices of us saying the same thing, being in the same space, providing an opportunity for resources, whether it's free or reduced resources for clients to get in, especially after these big traumas.
Who are we reaching out to? The therapist?
So reaching out to other therapists and then meeting with our community activists. And so we're blessed in this area. We have a lot of resources that come out, and we're willing to support different organizations in this. After our parade situation with we had a organization that came together. It was the trauma awareness piece of the Kansas City area, and they sent out press releases and got that out released and talked to on the radio and talked to in the different news organizations. When the news organizations are reporting all of this information, they have the ear of everybody, right? And we're telling them maintain that, but they also have the ear of everybody. They'll help spread the word of what you're trying to do and how you're trying to help everybody.
The therapist is to reach out.
Yeah, do the therapist reach out, because
okay. That's good.
Be proactive in our space. Now, if you're going through trauma and you're in that space, there's also others going through trauma, right? So don't be afraid to be in that space of speaking. Hey, I already go to therapy. Don't be afraid. Like, really encouraging when you're on your journey of trauma, whether it was before this event or during this event, be open. We used to live in a world where it was pretty, we don't talk about going to a therapist. We don't, it's really that language we didn't use. But if there's one thing I learned from my teenagers that I've been seeing going through this event and going through the events over the last couple of years, is they're really embracing, hey, I go to the therapist. I have some teenagers, they know each other. I've seen them high five each other on the stairs coming into my office. Okay. One coming in, one coming out, and they're like, and
oh, really?
So they're having conversations about this. And so I think we can take a page out of our teenagers' book of, hey, this is just a normal part of life, and sometimes we need somebody to get through something.
Totally normalize it. Totally normalize it.
So don't be afraid.
Therapists can then normalize it by going and reaching out to the community, to the radio stations, to the people who may have a platform of some sort, to begin to communicate to them, some of the ways in which we can affect change in this area, or be there, be a supportive agent, a support agent, I call it. I think this is so important, Eddie. Tell me anything else that now that we know what we're doing, that the therapist can get out there and talk and educate and put some resources out there and things like that. And is there any cultural considerations or beliefs or values or anything like that we need to consider when trying to impact people in the area of trauma-informed care, specifically for celebration trauma?
Being aware, cultural considerations are always part of our work, but cultural considerations for those who may be more open or may not be, depending on maybe what they've seen in their household. What we often see is that the male of the household is a little less, open about those things. And so what we're trying to do is reduce that concern. But as far as what to address in that area, be open, be receptive. And I think it kind of just comes back that knowing that people's trauma is unique, and patience. If we come back to the patience and know how to listen with those individuals and with individuals through all cultural considerations, that will be a space that allows us to be able to address it appropriately and have less concern about doing it culturally appropriately or culturally appropriate.
That's right. Wow. 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 So that's awesome. Is there anything else that you would like to add or emphasize about adopting trauma-informed approach or navigating transitions from celebration to trauma or to tragedy? Uh, you know, where our listeners can go and learn more about trauma-informed practices or find support resources or anything in their communities.
Resources are a great way. I love, there's never an opportunity for us to not, never an opportunity for us to stop learning, right? And so resources are such a big place. So from a child traumatic stress situation, I love using the the National Child Trauma Stress Network, which is nctsn.org. That's a great group for just being able to give us an opportunity from, they have links for coping with mass violence to being able to just be a parent and caregiver when traumas are going on. And so they've been such a great resource in that space. Some other groups, thinking through some other groups of what we do. Obviously, follow me. LinkedIn profile, Eddie-Barnett-LPC is one area, but acg-kc.com is my practice with the ampersand counseling group. But being able to just be available for other for those out there is most important. Don't be afraid of a resource. Check where they're coming from, but there is always an opportunity for you to ask more questions, ask where they're coming from, what that space is. And I think there's an opportunity for us all to continue to be able to provide each other with good resources.
Okay, great, Eddie. So, do you have an email or website that you want to share with us as well?
Yeah, and so you can definitely reach me at Eddie at acg-kc.com if there's any questions or follow-ups there. Find me on Facebook. Eddie Barnett Counseling is my Facebook link, and we'll have those. I'm sure Krystal will get those to you, and we can get those listed on the
Absolutely.
podcast too. So
Absolutely, absolutely. So this is great. So I think that this is very significant for the listener to learn, and it's going to raise a lot of awareness in reducing the stigma around trauma and mental health and providing support and resources that we can empower the people in this area. So I thank you for everyone for joining Trauma Talk today. Thank you, of course, Eddie, for joining me with Trauma Talks with Krystal Boothe. Stay tuned for our next episode where we'll continue to explore trauma and mental health and the topics around this area. So until then, take care and remember, hope is in every journey, okay? So have a great rest of your day. Bye bye.